of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. So then this prayer to the Buddha, which is in Tibetan, we'll recite that one time. And then the mantra of the Buddha, which is in Sanskrit, we'll recite a few times. Lama Tamba Chomdende Deshin Shekpa Dra Chomba Yang Takpa Dzogpe Sanye Pagyawa Shakya Tupala Chak Salo Choto Kyapsu Chiwo Om Muni Muni Maha Muneye Soha. 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 So I thought that we could do a meditation on where did it go? The last topic we were looking at last week, the end of last week's class, which was about the four aspects of the fourth noble truth called true paths. So we didn't have a chance to meditate on those, so I thought we could start with that tonight. So sit comfortably, trying to keep your back straight. Take a few minutes to settle down. Let your mind settle down in the here and now. Letting go of or putting aside thoughts there may be in your mind left over from today. Thoughts about things that you did or things that happened to you during the day today. So just put those aside for now. Also put aside any thoughts about later, what you're going to do later today, tonight, tomorrow, in the future. So put aside the past, put aside the future, and just let yourself be in the present moment, right here, right now. So one fairly easy way to get into that state of mind is to pay attention to the breath coming in and going out. And you can also expand your awareness to whatever sensations you may have in your body. Just be aware of whatever arises, whatever feelings, sensations arise in your body. So just be aware of those without being attached to any of them, nor rejecting any of them, because they are impermanent. They come, they go. So just observe your breath and any sensations in your body just coming and going. And now just take a few more moments to make sure the motivation you have for being here is positive, just in case you don't already have a positive altruistic motivation. So the Buddha, when he taught, did so out of compassion, love for all living beings without leaving anyone out. His wish was to help all living beings find happiness and become free of suffering. So it's good if when we listen to and learn about the Buddha's teachings, if we could try to have the same motivation in our mind, wishing that what we learn here, what we do here, what comes out of our activities here, it will be beneficial for not just ourselves, but for others as well, for as many other people and living beings as possible. Okay, so now let's just do a short meditation on the 4 aspects of true paths, which is the 4th noble truth. So in general, the 4th noble truth, the truth of the path, explains what we need to do in order to become free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And there's different ways of explaining this Fourth Noble Truth. But in the Mahayana tradition, as explained in the Tibetan tradition, it is said that the main path, or truth of the path, is the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So that state of mind, that realization that sees emptiness directly, meaning it sees the true nature of oneself and everyone else and everything else in the universe. So that state of mind, that realization, is the main path, because it's what really leads us out of suffering, leads us to enlightenment, liberation, and so on. So there are four aspects of the Fourth Noble Truth, true paths. The first is simply path. So this wisdom that realizes emptiness is a path, because just as an ordinary path will take us somewhere, like to some destination we want to go to, this wisdom realizing emptiness will take us to the destinations that the Buddha pointed out, like nirvana, liberation, freedom from suffering, enlightenment. So this wisdom is a path. It will take us out of suffering, out of cyclic existence, out of this situation we are in, where we, without control, die and take rebirth and experience problems over and over and over again. So this is the path out. Or we could also think of it as an escape route, a way to escape from prison. So this is it. This is the way to escape, the way to become free from the prison of samsara and to attain the real peace and happiness of liberation, or nirvana, enlightenment. And the second of the four aspects is suitability. So what that means is that this wisdom realizing emptiness is suitable to learn about and think about and meditate on and try to develop within ourselves. Because by doing this, by learning about it and developing it, we will be able to overcome ignorance. It's like the antidote to ignorance. Ignorance that doesn't understand the true nature of things. So by developing this wisdom, it will overcome or eliminate ignorance, which is the root of suffering. And in that way free our minds from ignorance and all the suffering that comes from it. So we could think of this second point as this wisdom is suitable because it's actually like a medicine, like a remedy, an antidote to the cause of suffering. And the third of the four aspects is achievement. So being able to attain this wisdom, developing in our minds this wisdom, is an achievement, because with this wisdom we realize the true nature of our mind and ourself and everything and everyone else in existence. So it's quite an achievement to be able to have this wisdom and see everything as they really are, rather than in a mistaken way. Then the fourth aspect is deliverer. So this wisdom, realizing emptiness, is a deliverer because it delivers us to the state of liberation, nirvana, which is a state of real, long-lasting and perfect peace and happiness. Because once that state is achieved, then there's no going back. There will never again be any suffering, any causes of suffering. So it's a final state. It's a final liberation. And it's this wisdom that enables us to achieve that state, sort of takes us to that state, delivers us to that state. So the reason or purpose for contemplating these different points is to overcome ideas that we might have, thinking there is no such thing as liberation, there's no path to liberation, there's no way to become completely free of suffering and its causes and so forth. So the Buddha taught otherwise based on his own experience, because he himself attained this state of liberation. And then he said, you can do it too, and this is how to do it. This is what you need to do. So it's difficult for us to be 100% sure that it's true, because it's not our experience right now. But it's good to at least think it might be true. The Buddha did it, others have done it. Maybe I can do it as well. Okay, so when you're ready to, you can open your eyes, relax. So last week I completed the first module of this program, Exploring Buddhist Philosophy. And the first module was about the Four Noble Truths. And then on Saturday in Stockholm, I began the second module on the Two Truths. Did any of you watch any of those videos? You saw me being really sick.
We saw it here together. We were four.
Okay.
Not all. But,
you were able to see it. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah. And so this module number 2 is about the Two Truths. And I spoke a bit about the connection between the Four Noble Truths and the Two Truths. They're not like totally different, disconnected subjects, but there are connections. One connection which I didn't mention. Is it on? So one connection I didn't mention last week When we talk about the three jewels of refuge, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, sometimes when you go into details, the fine print about the three jewels, it's said that there's an ultimate and a conventional aspect of each of the three jewels of refuge. So with regard to the Dharma refuge, it's said that like Dharma books, Dharma teachings, Dharma materials, those are actually the conventional Dharma. And then the ultimate Dharma, like the real Dharma, are the last two truths, true paths and true cessations and true paths. So those are the ultimate Dharma. And then when it comes to the Sangha, the third object of refuge, the relative or conventional Sangha are people. I mean, traditionally in Asian countries, they say it's the monks and nuns, but now in the West, there's the tradition of including all the members of a community, a Buddhist community, people who are learning together and practicing together. So this is called a Sangha. So, but ordinary people who are practicing the Buddhist path are like the relative Sangha, the conventional Sangha. The ultimate Sangha are the Aryas. Do you remember I mentioned before what an Arya is? Do you remember what an Arya is? What's the
realized emptiness?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a monk. It could be a layperson as well. Anybody, monk, non-layperson, anybody who has realized emptiness directly is an Arya. So the Aryas, those who have directly realized emptiness, those are the ultimate Sangha. And they have the last two truths in their minds, part of their minds. They have true cessations and true paths. So they have incorporated those. They've made those part of their minds. And so this is why, like there's this quotation from the Dalai Lama, which was in the notes. And I read it last Saturday. He said that this was in a book that he wrote, it's his teachings on the Four Noble Truths. He says, only when you have an understanding of the nature and relationship of the two truths are you in a position to fully understand the meaning of the Four Noble Truths. And once you understand the Four Noble Truths, then you have a sound foundation on which to develop a good understanding of what is meant by taking refuge in the three jewels. So these three topics, the two truths, the four truths, and the three jewels of refuge and taking refuge, they're all sort of interconnected, but it's in a little bit subtle and profound way. So what he's saying here is that, first, well, not necessarily first, but anyway, as a basis, as a foundation, we need to have a good understanding of the two truths. And then that will enable us to have a good understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And then on the basis of that, we will be able to really understand the meaning of refuge and who are the real objects of refuge that we want to take refuge in, and so on. So the two truths are very, very important to understand. So this is what we're going to try to do in this module, is to have a better understanding of the two truths. So what are the two truths? What are they called? Do you remember?
Relative and ultimate. Relative and ultimate.
Yeah, relative. Sometimes it's called conventional and ultimate. And in a very general way, conventional truth or relative truth concerns just the ordinary world, what we normally see and experience, and conventional reality of things. And then ultimate truth concerns how things really exist. What is the real nature, the reality, the truth of all of these things? And normally in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we are exposed to the Madhyamika Prasangika explanation of things. And according to that school, Ultimate truth is emptiness. Ultimate truth refers to emptiness, and then everything else, everything other than emptiness is conventional truth. So that's kind of simple in a way. Emptiness is ultimate truth. Everything else is conventional truth. But then it's not really that simple to understand because it's not easy to understand emptiness. And there are other schools of philosophy, Buddhist schools that have alternate explanations of the two truths. And it said that some of the other schools have a relatively easier explanation of the two truths, and learning about those and trying to understand those helps us gradually get closer to the Prasangika explanation. So it's like stepping stones. So that's why in the monasteries, they usually study what are called the four schools or four tenet systems and how they explain the two truths. And then, you start with the coarser, grosser levels of explanation and gradually work to the more subtle one, which is the Madhyamika. And so that's what we're going to do in this program. So also another thing, the two truths are said to be a dichotomy. Do you know what that means? Dichotomy?
No.
It means it's like two categories that cover everything that exists. So in other words, whatever exists is either an ultimate truth or conventional truth. Nothing else. There's nothing outside of those two truths. If it exists, it's either one or the other. And with regard to the Four Noble Truths, out of the Four Noble Truths, it said that one of the Four Noble Truths is an ultimate truth, and the other three are conventional truths. Do you want to guess which one is an ultimate truth?
Cessation. Cessation.
Right. Good guess. Or maybe you heard it before. Yeah. So the third noble truth, cessation, is an ultimate truth, and the other three are conventional truths. But hopefully that'll become more clear as we go along and have a better understanding of what the two truths are. So the first school that's usually studied is the Vaibhashika, or as it's translated in English, the Great Exposition School. Great Exposition. And this is because the reason they're called that is because of a particular text which supposedly they use. And this is a text that gives this very detailed explanations of lots of different things, lots of different phenomena. So I talked about that on Saturday and went through their explanations of the true truths. So do any of you remember how they explain the two truths? What would be ultimate truth according to the Vaibhashika school? Ultimate, what are ultimate truths? What about conventional truths? It's okay. It's a bit complicated. So according to this school, if you have the notes that I made last week, it's on page 4. There's a kind of chart or table. The true truths according to this school, the Vaibhashika school. So let's start with the ultimate truth, because in some ways it's a little easier to understand. So according to this school, ultimate truths are basically, we could say in a simple way, things that don't have parts or can't be broken down or divided into parts. So partless things, partless phenomena. And this school believes that there are tiny particles of matter. Like when you break down a physical object, like a table, you can break it down into smaller and smaller and smaller parts, but eventually you'll get to some very, very minute particle which can't be broken down any further. It's like similar to, I think, what scientists in the West used to believe, that there were partless particles, which are like the basic building blocks of all of matter. So this was a belief existing in the West before, but got thrown out with quantum physics. Yeah. Maybe some people still believe it. Just like some people still believe the world is flat. Things like
Not to me.
And okay, so anyway, this school believes that all the material phenomena in the world, which includes our bodies and includes all the physical material things in the world around us, are made of parts, and smaller and smaller and smaller parts, and eventually, you get down to these very, very minute partless particles, which can be broken down, can't be divided any further, and they form the basis for all the larger phenomena. So those tiny partless particles are examples of ultimate truths. And because they can't be broken down any further, basically. That's their reasoning. And they also say that in terms of the mind is a non-material, non-physical thing. And it also has parts in terms of time. Like this is common in all Buddhist schools. Buddhism says that our mind is changing all the time. So each moment there are new experiences arising, and they last only a moment and then pass, and the next one arises and passes, next one arises. So the mind is not like this solid block, indivisible block of awareness, but it's like a continuously changing stream of momentary mental events or experiences, each one lasting just a moment, coming, going, coming, going, coming, going. So, so the mind has parts, and according to this school, you can divide the mind up into smaller and smaller and smaller parts in terms of time. You can just, I don't know, I think in the West they talk about nanoseconds, milliseconds, they mean very, very fine divisions of time. So in some schools of Buddhism, they actually say in one moment, there can be millions of mind moments, mental events happening. And some people say, well, who can actually count them? Anyway, that's, but anyway, this is something common to all Buddhists. The number that occur in each moment, it might vary, but they definitely say that within a very, very short period of time, there can be many, many moments of mind, many individual experiences taking place. But this school says that you can come down to the tiniest, most briefest, I should say, mental event, state of mind, which can't be broken down any further. So they call that a partless moment of mind in terms of time. It can't be broken down any further. So those very, very, very brief moments of mind are also considered ultimate truths, according to this school. And then what's included in conventional truths would be, for example, the material objects that are composed of all these partless particles. So like our bodies, the table, and again, most of the gross objects in the world around us, which are made of these tiny particles. So those would be conventional truths. And the reason they're considered to be conventional truth is because you can break them down. You can take them apart. Either you can separate them physically, and or in some cases mentally. Just like mentally, conceptually, you can divide something into its parts. And when you divide something into its parts, you break it down into its parts, then it no longer exists as that object that it was before. So, for example, the table, if we can take the table apart and break it down into smaller and smaller and smaller parts, then it's no longer a table, right? You lose the table. And the same with our body. If you start dissecting a body and breaking it up into its parts, then it's no longer a body. So they say phenomena like that are just conventionally true. They're conventionalities rather than ultimate truths. And also with the mind, larger experiences or longer experiences of mind that are made up of these very, very, very brief, partless moments of mind, those would be also conventional truths. So this is how this school explains the two truths, conventional truths and ultimate truths. And the higher schools, for example, Madhyamika, that we're more familiar with, do not agree with this idea of partless particles. They say that that's it's not possible. So they would be more similar to the quantum physicists, and they have arguments. They have they use reasoning to refute the idea of partless particles. And nowadays we have scientific research to show that there's no such thing as partless particles. But so even though, like from the Madhyamika point of view, looking at what this school of Abhashakul is saying, they don't agree with all of it. Nevertheless, there is some benefit for us to contemplate what they are saying. So I wanted to read something from this book, Appearance and Reality, which is also talking about the two truths from the point of view of the different schools. So this is by Guy Newland, who's a scholar. He has a PhD from the University of Virginia in Buddhist studies. And he actually wrote another book, which is called The Two Truths. It's a big fat book. And really goes into great detail about the two truths if you're interested in this. So, he gives a comment here about this school's presentation. He says, this presentation of the two truths brings home the message that we have an ingrained predilection to see a gross sort of wholeness in ourselves, our bodies, and the external objects we encounter. So we tend to see things as very whole and gross and maybe indivisible. We fail to reflect upon the fact that such phenomena are imputed to collections of parts. Consequently, in our minds, they take on a solidity and substantiality which actually they do not have. The conventional truths of the great exposition system are subject to disintegration, but we ignorantly apprehend them as unchanging and permanent. We mistakenly see them as independent realities, when in fact they rely on the aggregation of things other than themselves. Okay, so things like our bodies and the bodies of others, tables and chairs and houses and so forth, are not that substantial as they appear to be, because they're made up of all these tiny particles and they can be broken apart. So they seem to be much more solid than they really are. They seem to be more permanent, and then they seem to be permanent and unchanging, which in fact they are not. And they seem to exist independently, which isn't true either, because they are dependent upon all of these parts. So by having these misapprehensions of things, we generate afflictive emotions such as desire and hatred. And these emotions in turn motivate the actions that trap us in a cycle of suffering. So this shows how by not seeing things as composed of parts and impermanent, subject to change, and dependently existing rather than independently existing, then we can get caught up in emotions, mainly desire and attachment and aversion towards these things. And that's one of the main causes for us to stay in samsara, cyclic existence. So yogis, meditators, can notice and experience the very subtle particles and the partless moments of mind. So it said that yogis, through their practice of meditation, can develop their minds to such an extent they can actually see these little particles of matter and see these momentary particles of mind. And so according to this school, by developing that awareness, they are able to get rid of the ignorant conceptions of a permanent, partless, independent self and a substantially existent self, and eventually attain nirvana, which is a true cessation. So this is how this school explains what you do with this information. Okay, this explanation of the two truths, ultimate truths, conventional truths, and how things really exist. So it isn't just something like a mind game, to play with, but you actually meditate on phenomena, particularly yourself. The main object of meditation in this school is looking at oneself, one's own existence, and coming to see that, what we are is basically just a combination of these little particles of matter and these momentary and constantly changing mental events. And by looking at, our body and mind in that way and seeing how they really exist, the real nature of our bodies and minds, one comes to see that there's actually no permanent, unchanging, whole, indivisible self or I anywhere within the body and mind. And so that becomes then the realization of selflessness. So that's the main object of meditation in this school, is meditating on and coming to a realization of selflessness. And by realizing selflessness, one will be able to overcome ignorance, which doesn't see selflessness, but sees there's a real self here. So you wipe out that ignorance and then all the other disturbing emotions, and you achieve nirvana. So that's the real goal of this school, nirvana. And also according to the school, nirvana is also an ultimate truth. So ultimate truths are not only these partless particles and partless moments of mind, but all permanent phenomena. Do you remember the meaning of permanent phenomena? It was in the notes, and I talked about it last Saturday. What does it mean to be permanent in Buddhism? I'll give you a clue. It's opposite of impermanent. Huh?
Not changing.
Not changing. Yeah, that's the main meaning of permanent. That something is permanent if it doesn't change moment by moment by moment. So most of the things we normally deal with are impermanent phenomena, like our bodies, our minds, and the material things in the world around us, other people's bodies and minds. So all of these things are impermanent. They're subject to change. They are changing moment by moment by moment. But then there are also phenomena that are permanent, meaning that they don't change moment by moment. And these are more abstract things, abstract phenomena. One example they often give is what they call uncompounded space. Uncompounded space as opposed to compounded space. So these terms compounded and uncompounded. Compounded means made up of parts, made up of different things. Okay, so like this table is compounded of different pieces of wood and molecules and atoms and glue and nails and whatever. went into making the table. Our bodies are compounded of many, many different substances. Okay, so compounded phenomena and impermanent phenomena are interchangeable. Those are synonymous. So whatever is impermanent is compounded. And then uncompounded is the opposite. Uncompounded means it's not made up of many different parts and substances and causes and conditions. So it's not compounded. And so in Buddhism, they talk about uncompounded space. And this is space, not like outer space up in the sky, but it's said to be the space that pervades everything. So, of course, in this room, there's lots of space, but even where there are solid objects, like the table and the beams and the pillars, the walls, the cushions, our bodies. So there's also space here. So wherever there are solid objects, physical objects, there's space there as well. So space is said to be the absence of obstructive contact. It doesn't obstruct contact. It doesn't obstruct movement. So it allows for movement. It allows for things to be in places. So it's kind of an abstract thing, but they say it does exist. And space, they often talk about space because they say that space and emptiness are similar. There's similarities between uncompounded space and emptiness. Emptiness is also like space, not exactly the same, but it's also an absence. It's an absence of something. And another example that's given of a permanent phenomena, which is always quite funny, is the absence of an elephant in the room. I mean, there's lots of absences, but they use that one. And I think it's because an elephant is such a large object that if it was in the room, you would know it. Okay, we can't miss it. It can't hide under the furniture or behind the cushions. Okay, so if an elephant was in this room, everybody would know it. So then it's very easy to know that there isn't an elephant in this room. An elephant is absent in this room. So the absence of an elephant in this room is said to be a permanent phenomena because it's not actually a thing. It doesn't have it's not made of particles. It's not something that came into existence because of causes and conditions coming together. It's just an absence. And then, of course, people say, yeah, but what if an elephant walked into the room? Then that absence of the elephant wouldn't exist anymore. And that's true. But permanent phenomena, this is something I mentioned in the notes, we have to put aside our ordinary understanding of the terms permanent and impermanent, because, I mean, in English, it's probably the same in Danish. The meaning of permanent is it lasts forever. And impermanent means it doesn't last forever. It's going to end at some point in time. So the Buddhist explanation of these terms isn't quite the same. The real meaning of impermanent is it's changing all the time. And the real meaning of permanent is it's not changing all the time. That's the real meaning. Something that is permanent can have a limited lifespan, limited period of time that it exists. Doesn't mean it lasts forever. For example, the absence of an elephant in the room. Okay, so if there was a time when the elephant was there, then he went out. So then he's not there. The absence of the elephant is there. But if he comes back in, the absence of the elephant stops to exist. So a permanent phenomena can have a beginning and an end. It can have a limited lifespan. But while it's existing, while it's there, it doesn't change. And this is true for emptiness, because emptiness is a permanent phenomena. It's something that doesn't change. Emptiness is the quality. It's a quality of every single thing. Whatever exists has emptiness as its real nature. Its true nature. So, for example, this cup, as well as everything else in the universe, has emptiness as its quality. The true nature of this cup is emptiness. And so when the cup came into existence, when the cup was produced in the factory, probably in China, the emptiness of the cup also came into existence. It started to exist when the cup started to exist. And then if the cup gets smashed into millions of pieces, it's no longer a cup. The emptiness of the cup will also not exist anymore. So the emptiness of the cup exists only as long as the cup exists. So it has a beginning and an end. It's a temporary phenomena, but it's still said to be a permanent phenomena because while it's there, while it's existing, it doesn't go through changes. But the cup does. The cup changes. The cup is changing every moment because it's made of material particles that are changing. Molecules, atoms, subatomic particles. So that's changing all the time. But the emptiness of the cup doesn't change. But don't worry if you don't understand this. It's something you probably have to hear again and again and again before you get it. And so why was I talking about this? How did I get to this one? Oh yeah. So this school, Vaibhashika school, says that whatever is permanent phenomena are also ultimate truths. And it's basically because you can't divide them up. There are things you can't break down into parts. I mean, space, you can't divide space into parts, right? You can't cut up space. Except conceptually, of course, you can say, my space. This is my space. You stay in your space and I'll stay in my space. But we can't actually cut up space in any way. And the same with things like emptiness or nirvana. These are things which cannot be divided up. So therefore, they fall into the basket of ultimate truth.
Ask a question just there.
Yeah.
I remember asking this question, and the answer I was given was that space is also dependent on its parts of direction.
That's the Madhyamika position.
Yeah.
Yeah. According to Madhyamika, because I said the higher schools don't agree with this school. Okay. So the higher schools like Madhyamika would say there's nothing that doesn't have parts. Nothing is partless. Everything has parts. So what I'm just presenting this school's point of view. So they say that there are things that are partless, these little particles, space, and so forth. They don't have parts. But that's why I say the higher schools kind of refute that, argue with that.
All the schools agree to a certain point.
There's some things they agree on, some things they don't agree on. Yeah.
Right. So the higher school will agree with all of the lower schools. No. Not
necessary. No, like this one, like this particular point of partless particles. So the higher schools say that's ridiculous. That's not true.
That's where they step.
Yeah. So some of the things that well, like what I read from this book, how learning about or thinking about contemplating this school's explanation of things does help us to see things as less solid. Yeah. So that can help us in terms of getting closer to the Madhyamika understanding of things, but also it helps us just in our daily life. If you think about things as made up of particles and changing moment by moment by moment, you really think about that and get a sense of that and experience of that, it helps to reduce attachment and aversion and these kind of disturbing emotions. Maybe not immediately, but over time, getting more and more familiar with that view of things. And the Madhyamikas wouldn't argue with that. I mean, they would say, yes, it's true. That pillar isn't as solid as it appears because it's made up of little particles. What they don't agree with is that you get down to a very tiny particle which can't be broken down any further. They say, no. That too can be broken down into parts. But they would certainly agree that things are made of parts, and because of that, they're not as solid as they appear to be. And they're also impermanent, changing moment by moment.
Just follow up the question. Maybe it's too many steps ahead. But does the Madhyamika school also agree that permanent phenomena don't have a beginning and end?
Permanent phenomena can have a beginning and an end.
Because there's this beautiful sentence in one of the prayers, as long as space exists, which implies that it has a beginning and an end.
Okay, what I'm saying is some permanent phenomena exist forever. Some do not.
Yes.
So I was trying to make the point that we shouldn't think that permanent necessarily means it will last forever.
So my point is that space itself.
Space itself, I think it would always exist.
Because that beautiful sentence which says, as long
As space remains,
remains,
as long as sentient beings remain, that long will I too remain. Well, this is getting into something.
So the emptiness of space will no longer remain.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's not so.
We can't prove it also conventionally.
Yeah, well, it's only this school that says that space is an ultimate truth. The Madhyamikas would say no, space is conventional truth. But as for the question of does it last forever? Is it going to be there forever and ever and ever? I don't know. I can't answer that one. Maybe. Anyway, so I thought that, yeah, did somebody? I thought maybe after the break, we could have a break now, and after the break, we could do a little bit of contemplation on, just to get a sense of how we could meditate on this school's explanation of things, particularly in with respect to our own self and how it can be helpful to start to break down the sense of a solid, real self or I. Okay, so let's have a break for 10 minutes. Okay, so let's do a little meditation on this school's explanation of things, which, even though it's not 100% correct according to Prasangika, but mostly correct and very helpful. So take a few minutes to settle down physically, mentally. So try your best to have a state of mind that's calm and clear, awake, focused, alert, but at the same time relaxed, not tight or tense. And if you think you might become sleepy and start to fall asleep, then it could be helpful not to close your eyes completely, but leave them open a little bit, looking down on your lap or the floor in front of you. So just having that little bit of light coming into your eyes can help you stay awake. So all the Buddhist schools agree that we have a misunderstanding about our own self, our own nature, who we are, what we are, how we exist. We exaggerate our sense of self, believing in a self existing in a way that it actually doesn't, a sort of exaggerated false sense of self. And most people probably go through life and never check, never examine who they think they are, what they think they are. They just go along believing that they know who they are, how they exist, and just acting on that basis all the time. So Buddhism says we need to check, we need to investigate. What is our sense of self? And does it exist the way it appears to? So a good way to do this is to try to remember an experience you had where your sense of self was very strong. This happens when we get emotional, we get angry, upset, hurt, frightened, or really happy, really excited. Like if somebody says something wonderful to you, or you win a prize, or so try to remember some recent experience where you had some strong emotion, either a disturbing emotion or a positive emotion. So try to remember that experience, bring it to mind as clearly as you can. But when you do, try not to get caught up in the emotion itself, and instead try to look behind or beneath the emotion and get a glimpse of the sense of I who is feeling that emotion. I who is angry, upset. I who is frightened. I who is excited. So see if you can catch a glimpse of that I. So if you are able to get a glimpse or even a clear picture of this sense of I, that's great. But if you can't, don't worry, because it's actually quite hard to do. It's actually kind of slippery. When we're not looking, it's there. But then when we try to look for it or find it, it can slip away. But anyway, we can go on and just do some analysis of it. So usually this sense of I seems to be something that is really there. It's existing on its own, from its own side, almost like it can stand by itself independently, doesn't need anything else or depend on anything else. It stands by itself. And it can also appear to be something permanent, unchanging, like it's always there, doesn't change. So let's just think about what really does exist, especially according to this school of Abhashika school, and see if our sense of self or I is realistic in terms of what's really there. So one thing that's really there is our body. We have this physical body, but our body isn't just one whole, solid, unchanging thing. It's made up of parts. So some of these parts we can see, like our skin, nails, hair, teeth, eyes, nose. We know inside there are other parts like our bones and our organs, blood, blood vessels, veins, muscles, and so forth. So those are the gross parts of the body, but they are made up of smaller parts, cells, and at a subtler level, molecules, atoms, and so on. So we can go down to finer and finer, smaller and smaller parts of the body. And according to this school, we'll eventually come to very, very tiny particles of physical matter, which can't be broken down any further. So just think about that. Just get a sense of how your body, even though it seems very solid and also maybe unchanging, isn't really like that, because it's made of all these parts and they're changing. They're impermanent. They come, they go. So now ask yourself if you think you can find this sense of a self, sense of a real independently existing I, me, myself, in the body, among any of those parts of the body, the physical body. Do any of them correspond to your sense of self or I? then the other main part of us is our mind, our consciousness. And this is not a physical thing. In fact, it's non-physical, non-material. But it is also made of parts in terms of time. So over time, there are different mental events that arise and last for a brief moment of time and then pass, and immediately the next one arises and then passes, and the next one arises and passes, and so on. So our mind is like a stream, constantly changing. It's never the same from one moment to the next, because there are all these momentary, very short, very brief mental states, mental events, coming, going, coming, going. So it's not easy to see this. We can see how our mind changes sometimes from one moment to the next, but according to this school, it changes very, very fast. Just in a very short period of time, there could be thousands or even millions of different mental events that come and go. So just spend some time contemplating that and ask yourself if this sense of I, the sense of a real, permanent, unchanging, independently existing self, I, me, can be located within the mind. Can you point to any part of the mind as being the I? So you might think that you can't really find something in the body or in the mind that is the I, but it still seems like there is an I. It's really there. So if that's the case, then what is it? What kind of phenomena is it? Where can it be located? What kind of properties or qualities does it have? But in case any of you think that maybe there is no I at all, that I don't exist, I'm just hallucinating my existence and I'm not really here. So that's not the correct conclusion. That's a nihilistic point of view, and we don't want to go there. That's not healthy. So we do exist. We do have a body. There's a body sitting here and it feels sensations. It gets hungry. It's tired, cold. It needs to be taken care of. And we do have a mind with all kinds of thoughts and emotions coming and going. So these do exist. It's not that they don't exist. The problem is we think there's a real me, a real I, somewhere within this collection of body and mind. And sometimes it takes the form of a boss, someone in charge, a CEO, a king, a president that's telling us what to do. It's always directing things, controlling things, making decisions. Go here, go there, do this, do that. And it seems like it's there. And we tend to believe in it and follow it and don't usually question it. So that's the thing that we're looking for. That's the thing we're investigating. Does that really exist? So the Buddhist explanation is that that sense of a real, independent, permanent I doesn't exist. It's false. It's like a hallucination. But we do exist. We have this body, we have this mind, and the self or I, me, is just imputed, labeled, just like a conventional way of referring to ourselves. So that's how we really exist. So this kind of investigation of the self or the I is something that we need to do again and again, and not expect that we're going to come to an answer or a conclusion anytime soon. But it's an ongoing process. We could spend years or maybe our whole life looking for this sense of self and working on it and trying to understand how we really exist. So what we did just now is just a sort of very brief way of doing it. You could spend a lot longer if you want to. When I was in Stockholm on Sunday, we had Sunday morning to do meditation. So we did kind of a much longer meditation. We went through all the 5 aggregates one at a time and looking for the I. And afterwards we had a discussion about it. And some people mentioned fear, that they feel afraid. The idea of no self, no solid, permanent, real self can be very frightening. And that's true. I've heard and met people who get really frightened when they do this kind of meditation. And I was thinking, that's interesting. Why are we afraid? Why do we have fear of? I mean, it's understandable. Because they say it's like you get a sense of that you're losing yourself, you're disappearing. So it can be quite frightening. So that's why they say in the teachings that we need to be quite well prepared before meditating on emptiness. It's best to study, to become familiar with the teachings about emptiness, so we know what we're doing. We're not just groping in the dark. We have a good understanding of what we're doing, but also why we're doing it. Because the whole point of doing this kind of meditation in Buddhism is because not understanding who we are or how we exist, the real nature of the self or the I, is the basis of our suffering. Because we don't understand that, then we get caught up in so many disturbing emotions, attachment and aversion, and then act out these emotions and create all kinds of problems for others and for ourselves, create karma. And this is why we keep dying and taking rebirth again and again and again. So according to Buddhism, all the suffering in the world really comes from not understanding our real nature. So if you understand that, then you're kind of happy to, realize the emptiness of the self, non-self. But still, you have to do it very carefully. They say otherwise there's the danger of falling into nihilism on one side, which is thinking I don't exist, nothing exists. Or the other extreme is what they call eternalism or permanence. And that's where you really grasp onto a real I. So we have to find this middle way between those two. And I think it's a bit like walking on a tightrope. You have to be very careful to not fall off. So we have a bit of time left, and I wanted to start talking about the next school, the Sautrantika school. And this is a school. It's called Sautrantika, which translates into English as Sutra school. They call it the Sutra school. And this school is based on works of two great Indian masters, Dignaga and Dharmakirti. Have you heard of them? They lived in, Dignaga was in the 5th century CE, and Dharmakirti in the 7th century. Actually, the Dalai Lama is supposed to be teaching in Latvia in October. He's going to be teaching in Latvia for a few days in October. And what he's going to be teaching is part of this text by Dharmakirti, which is called the Pramanavartika, Compendium of Valid Cognition, which is very unusual to have teachings about that. But apparently it's very, very, very important. He's putting a lot of emphasis on that text because it's all about logic, how to prove things, how to prove that there's such a thing as enlightenment, for example. So anyway, in October, we'll have a chance to learn a little bit about Dharmakirti's writings. So these two masters are famous for their explanations on phenomena, and particularly about the mind, how the mind works, all the different types of mind, and also logic, the use of logic to prove something like emptiness, for example, emptiness, selflessness, or the possibility of attaining enlightenment. So that's what they are famous for. And in the Gelugpa monasteries, they study, one of the topics studied is called Lorik. It's also part of the basic program. Lorik means awarenesses and knowledge and awareness, knowers and awareness. So it's basically looking at the mind, studying all the different aspects of the mind, different types of mind, how the mind works, mental factors, and so forth. So it's really, it's a hard subject, but it's really, really interesting, really helpful to be able to know more about your mind, how your mind works, and so on. So according to this school, they have quite an interesting explanation of the two truths. We were talking earlier about permanent phenomena as opposed to impermanent phenomena. Okay, that's another dichotomy. A dichotomy, again, is something that, like, two groups that everything fits into. Whatever exists is either this or that. So permanent and impermanent are like that. Whatever exists is either impermanent, changing all the time, or permanent, not changing all the time. There's nothing beyond those two. So according to this school, ultimate truths are impermanent phenomena. impermanent phenomena are ultimate truth. So that means our bodies and our minds and the table and all the material things in the world around us. So all the impermanent things, all the things that are changing moment by moment, those are ultimate truths. And conventional truths are permanent phenomena. So whatever is permanent, because remember, permanent things are things that are kind of more abstract, like space, like emptiness, absences of elephants and queens and so on in this room. So all those phenomena are considered conventional truth. And one reason for this, one reason for making this kind of, why they put those type of phenomena in those categories is that impermanent phenomena are also said to be functioning things. They function, they perform functions, whereas permanent phenomena are not able to perform functions. So a phenomena being able to perform functions is considered something quite important. For one thing, it's able to produce effects. It's able to give rise to other things. Permanent phenomena cannot do that. They cannot produce effects. So bodies, for example, bodies can produce more bodies. Mothers and fathers can make babies. Seeds can produce plants and trees and so on. And even a table can perform a function. We can put things on it. And if it gets really, really cold, we can cut it up and make firewood out of it and keep ourselves warm. Okay, so they're useful things. We can do things with them. Whereas permanent phenomena are not like that. They're not able to do anything with them. And well, that's not completely true because, for example, emptiness is a permanent phenomena. And if we are able to get a realization of emptiness, then we'll be able to free ourselves from all our suffering and we'll be able to attain liberation and enlightenment. But it's not emptiness itself that brings about those results. Rather, it's the wisdom, the mind that realizes emptiness that is able to achieve those results. And that wisdom that realizes emptiness, that is an impermanent phenomena. Because emptiness is just there. I mean, it's here. It's all around us all the time. It's there. And it's not producing any effects on its own. It's not bringing us to enlightenment by itself. It's only when we're able to get the realization of emptiness, to see it, to realize it, to know it. That's when we get the results of liberation and enlightenment. So permanent phenomena on their own are not able to produce anything, bring any effects, any results, good or bad. So that's one of the reasons why this school says that ultimate truths are things that are real. Because this school says that impermanent phenomena, tables and chairs and bodies and so forth, these are like inherently existing, intrinsically existing. They really exist. They really are there. They have their own qualities, their own properties. They're existing out there from their own side. They're not depending on our mind. So again, it's quite different from the Madhyamika. Okay, put aside Madhyamika. It says everything depends on the mind. According to this school, no. Things are really out there, whether we think about them or see them or not. They have their own real existence, their own real way of existing. So from the point of view of Madhyamika, it's a rather strange explanation of things.
This is what the Lama will be talking
Well, I mean, the text, I haven't had a chance to study the texts of Dignaga and Dharmakirti. I mean, they're not only talking about this. This is just one aspect of what they're talking about. I think that the particular teaching of Dharmakirti's text that he's going to talk about is from chapter 2. And apparently chapter 2 contains a whole explanation, a logical explanation of the possibility of attaining enlightenment. So it's pointing out why enlightenment is possible. There's actually a book, a translation of that text by somebody named Roger Jackson, an American. Why enlightenment is possible. I haven't had a chance to read it. It's one of these big scholarly books. But so I think that's what the Dalai Lama is going to be talking about. So that's considered very important, to be able to logically prove the possibility of enlightenment, because, otherwise it can be quite difficult to believe that it's really possible for my mind to change and transform and reach the state of enlightenment. And if we're not 100% convinced of that, then it's hard to really put our energy into doing what we need to do to reach enlightenment. But if we could be really convinced of it and get rid of all our doubts, then, it'd be easier to put our energy into it. So there's a lot of things about this school that are very, very important and very useful for realizing the higher schools. One example of that is, like I said, this school has a really good explanation of the mind and the different aspects of the mind. And they say that there's one way of dividing up the mind is into perception and conception. And I'm going to actually be talking about this more in the next module on the mind. But just briefly, perception, the term perception refers to, for example, we have 5 senses: seeing, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. 5 ways of perceiving objects. And so that's called perception. Sometimes it's called direct perception. And I think, as far as I know, all the Buddhist schools regard direct perception as the most accurate way of knowing things. It's most direct. It's like when you have a perception, your mind is really contacting the object in the most direct way. As opposed to conception. Conception is the other way that our mind knows things. And conception, let's just say, for example, you look at an object, like you look at this lamp. Okay, so when you're looking at the lamp, that's a perception. Okay, you have a, in Buddhism, they use the term eye consciousness. Okay, so when we're looking at the lamp, we have an eye consciousness, seeing the lamp, and we're able to see its color, its shape, its details, and so forth. So that's a direct perception. And then if we close our eyes and think about the lamp, we can get some kind of mental picture of the lamp, but it's different. That way of experiencing the lamp is quite different. Yeah, it's not as vivid and sharp. We don't see all the details. It doesn't appear as clearly as when we have an eye consciousness of it. We can still think of it. We can still get some experience of the lamp, but it's greatly reduced. Yeah, does that make sense? So it's the same way. I mean, we have lots and lots of conceptions. We're thinking all the time. And we can, and in a way, conception is really good because, for example, you can think about your loved ones. You can think about your partner, your kids, your dog, your friends, even when you're far away from them. So you can think of those people and have good thoughts, good feelings, wish them well, pray for them, feel happy thinking about them and so on. So you don't have to be physically present with them. They don't have to be right there in front of you, looking at them to be able to think of them. So in a way, conception, thought is quite flexible because we can be anywhere and think about anything. Whereas to have a direct perception of a lamp or a person, they have to be physically present with you. So there's a limitation to perception, but the way in which our mind experiences an object is much more clear and sharp and vivid with perception. And this becomes significant when it comes to emptiness or selflessness, because what we want and what we need is to have a direct perception of emptiness or selflessness. And that direct perception. Now here we're not talking about an I consciousness. When the direct perception of emptiness is using the sixth consciousness, the mental consciousness, because emptiness is not something we can see or hear or smell. We can't know it with any of our five senses. We can only know it with our mental sense. So it is possible to have a direct perception with our mental consciousness, the sixth sense. So that's the kind of mind that we need to develop to directly see emptiness. And that wisdom that directly perceives emptiness, that is the atom bomb, the nuclear bomb that just wipes out ignorance and all of our other delusions and enables us to get free of suffering and achieve liberation and enlightenment. So that's the most important state of mind that we need to develop. However, we can't just immediately go into that state of mind. We can't just immediately see emptiness directly. Before that, we have to develop a conceptual understanding of emptiness. We have to think about, we have to listen to teachings and study and think about it and, really work on it for quite a while, and then come to a conceptual understanding of emptiness, understanding emptiness conceptually. Then once you have that, you keep meditating more and more and more and more and more. And it said eventually that conceptual mind will turn into a direct perception. So it's important in terms of our spiritual practice, the path to enlightenment, to have some understanding of these two types of mind, conception and perception, how they work, how they relate to each other. And again, it's this school's explanation of the mind that's so helpful to be able to get that understanding. So kind of
when you're talking about eye consciousness, you're talking about the physical eyes or the self eye?
IEYE. Yeah.
It's supposed to be relevant.
Mm-hmm. No, I was talking about eye consciousness, looking at the lamp. Or we have ear consciousness, hearing sounds. We have nose consciousness, smelling odors, and so on. Yeah, so that's how they're talked about in Buddhism. They say eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness. So those are five ways of perceiving objects on the sensory level. And then there's the sixth consciousness, the mental consciousness, which most of the time it's conceptual, but it can also be direct perception. There's some, for example, the direct perception of emptiness. And another example of a direct perception with a mental consciousness is clairvoyance, which probably we don't have the experience of, but some people do. They say, it's the ability to see somebody else's mind, to see what somebody else is thinking. So that is not with any of the five senses, it's with the sixth sense.
And there's a state of consciousness which observes all content of experience. A state of consciousness which observes all content of experience, all content of...
You mean the Buddha's mind, omniscient mind?
Yeah.
Well, that's a different ball game.
The way we sense from moment to moment as well. When we realize that our awareness shifts, that our experiences change, that which is observing those changes is permanent and awake to those changes.
You mean you're saying a part of the mind that observes the changes happening in the mind?
Yes.
You say that's permanent?
It's a permanent, no, it's a permanent stream, of course. But it's
ongoing, continuous. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I thought you were talking about the eye consciousness itself.
Oh, no. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. People sometimes ask about that. What is it that is aware of the rest of the mind? Yeah, because we do have that sense of paying attention to our experiences and noticing our experiences. And it's, to me, it seems like the only thing I can come up with is one particular mental factor, because it's not that we have two different minds, one mind looking at the rest of the mind. You know, we only have one mind stream. But they say there's one mental factor which is called introspection. Sometimes it's called introspection, or I don't know other terms for it. But anyway, introspection is good enough. So it's a mental factor. It's one of the mental factors, and it has the ability to pay attention to the mind itself. For example, if we're trying to do calm abiding meditation, yeah, so you need to develop that mental factor to be able to sort of keep an eye on what your mind is doing and know if your mind is on the object or off the object or doing something else. They say it's like a spy, spying on yourself, spying on your mind. So they say that's the function of introspection. So I'm wondering if that is it's that mental factor that is paying attention to the rest of the mind and noting, if you're angry, if you're happy, if you're loving, if you're whatever.
Hot, cold,
Hmm?
wherever our attention is taken.
Yeah.
The two terms Rigpa and Zen.
Oh, you're talking about Nyingma Dzogchen. Yeah, that's the Dzogchen terminology, which I haven't really studied. So
I was just going into the parts of the mind in a way that the mind is itself able to observe its own actions, its own content.
Yeah, I haven't studied that particular tradition, so I couldn't, because we also, in the Gelugpa tradition, they also have the terms Rigpa and Sem, but the way they're used is different. Different explanation.
Conception and perception. That which is the object and that which is viewing the object.
Well, I'm not qualified to talk about that. Yeah, I'm just talking from the Gelugpa Sutrantika low rig point of view. Okay, so we're going to have to stop there tonight. Next week we won't have class because it's Easter. Easter.
The Buddhists have Easter?
Huh? Easter holiday.
Okay.
Also, I'm going away. I'm going to France. So we'll meet again 2 weeks from tonight, 31st of the month. And I'll try to prepare. I will prepare the next set of notes for the next class. Next week, the Tuesday class will happen. Yeah, and also the week after Easter. So it's just one break in the Thursday class. So let's finish by dedicating.
Where is it that we can find the notes?
Sorry?
Where is it that we can find the notes?
FPMT's homepage. It's under resources on the left-hand side.
Actually, it's written on the board over there.
Right.
I think on the bottom of the board it tells you where you can find the notes as well as the videos, whatever videos you may have missed. Yeah.
I can show you here also.
Okay, so let's dedicate the merit, the positive energy, that it will be beneficial for all living beings, to be free of suffering and its causes, to achieve happiness and its causes, and eventually, ultimately, reach enlightenment. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chanrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Okay, good night. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
I just wanted to mention, so most of you know, so but those of you who don't, please, if you can, consider leave a donation for the center to keep running, and especially if you keep coming regularly, consider setting up a monthly donation for the center. You can find more about that on the website fmtd.co/donate. Thank you. Before going to the